my bad. Okay, so let's get this started. So, my name is Christopher Brown, and this is my psychological factors presentation. And without further ado, let's get this started. Cool. So, first things first, my target population and rationale for this project was 3 individuals. They all kind of wanted the same thing, but had vastly different reasons for wanting it. And I selected them because they're accessible to me at this time. So sure, I would have loved to work with maybe more specific subjects that were specific to my future career, but in times like these, you kind of settle for what you can get. So the first subject was a middle-aged male. He played sports all throughout high school, weightlifted a lot of his young adult career, but as he's getting closer to that 50 point, he's like, I'm too busy with this and that and work and everything else to keep on weightlifting. So he kind of wants to get back into shape. The second subject is about a middle-aged female. She's an English teacher right now at a high school. She's also in a band and she runs her own motion company. And she's kind of starting to notice that she's falling in that same boat, but more so not because she wants to look exactly like she did before, but she has so many clothes. That was her main reason. She has so many clothes that she acquired over the years, and she wants to be able to wear those same clothes, right? She has pants she's had for 20 years. She wants to keep wearing them. And the last subject is a 20-year-old female, currently working on her bachelor's degree, and she has a part-time job. And she wants to get in shape because she's seeing all her friends get in shape on social media, and she wants to hop on the train. So they all kind of get in better shape, but for different reasons. So some notable texts and articles that I selected. The first one is a textbook. It's by the same company that produces our textbook, which is Human Kinetics, but it's a different textbook. So one of their chapters in the book talks about 3 main psychological factors they found to influence biophysical activity, right? So any kind of moderate to vigorous activity. So the 3 reasons they came up with was first was exercise participation motivation, which is their motivation to get started, that kind of beginning reason, lose 20 pounds by the end of the year or something like that. The second is their exercise adherence motivation, which is their kind of reasoning for continuing to go after they've already started. And the third one was goal setting. So a lot of the subjects or the people that they found that for the use in their textbook had some kind of unrealistic goals or just kind of goals in general that they wanted to achieve. Second notable article, this one's not a textbook, is positive affect and physical activity. So this was a study done by Cameron et al. In 2017, in which they kind of took 2 groups, one group that had more of an optimistic look and view of exercise and overall optimistic view like on life, and then another group that was kind of like down in the dumps and were prescribed exercise, but they didn't really want to do it because they didn't see the point and yada, yada, yada. So what they get into is the whole idea that optimism has a huge benefit on not only adherence levels, but also like willingness to exercise, to begin exercise. So that kind of first factor, the participation motivation that I mentioned from the other text. So yeah, that kind of just points out the benefits of creating a sense of optimism in the workplace amongst your clients. The last article that I selected was setting specific goals. So specific goals. So this one was Bach et al. In 2018. They did a study on more than 200 individuals. They're all just around the age of 45, and they were all overweight. Their BMI was significantly over 25, all the participants, I believe. And their whole idea was to increase total weekly moderate to vigorous physical activity. And specific to this study, they split them into 2 groups. The first group, their goal was to increase the total number of sessions. So they went from exercising 3 times a week to 4, or 4 times to 5, depended on the individual. And the other group focused on increasing session length. So the total number of minutes they spent per exercise session. And they found that for this group in particular, the group that benefited most and increased their MVPA the most was this group that increased session length. So that doesn't go to show that increasing session length is the be-all, end-all, and that's all we have to know. But specific to this group, and maybe in the future specific to my clients, setting one goal, such as trying to put more weight on the bench press rather than trying to get more reps, may kind of psychologically be it for them. That might be what they want to do. That might cause them to adhere more to the exercise program than simply trying to get more reps. it varies person to person. That's why I kind of pointed this out. Cool. So then we get into the idea of physical environment. So this photo that I've selected is Arnold Schwarzenegger and then his son. So this is just kind of the effect of like a positive environment, right? He grew up with this. I'm sure he had tons of photos on his wall, and people would always talk about how buff and yoked up his dad was. So he kind of grew into this culture of healthy habits where he wanted to eat right, make sure he's consuming enough protein, sleeping enough. And he looks pretty good. I mean, he's not nearly as big as his dad. He's nowhere as big as his dad, but his dad was on steroids at the time, so you can only do so much. But yeah, so this just kind of goes to show, besides the steroids, that he was fostered into this idea of good exercise habits, and it stuck with him for a long time. So Bauman et al. Just kind of did the same thing. They listed some effects of environment and culture and how that can positively and negatively affect people. So getting into the next side, we have some negatives, right? So we had an example of someone who was raised in a positive environment. Now we kind of look at negative effects of physical environment. And the biggest thing is for a coach such as myself or anybody who works in this field is that you have to see these barriers as something that you can overcome, right? So you have to see the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. You have to do what you can with what you have, right? Sure, I would love if my client could come to the gym 7 times a week for as many hours as he needs to. We get him in tremendous shape. That's hypothetical, of course. But if we looked at it realistically, not everybody, most people do not have time 7 days out of the week to get to the gym, right? So while they are there, it's important that we create this environment. So Anshel kind of puts out on textbook, create an environment, offer towels. We got to have clean, updated equipment, just kind of things to pull them into the gym. Not so much as get them to spend more money, but to get them to spend their time and get the most out of their membership so that they're not seeing that as wasted, right? If they're going to the gym and they're like, oh, my gym is super dirty, so I got to be careful about all the rust and all the equipment is super dirty and it's always super packed and gross, then it's they're not going to want to come back. We have to create that sense of adherence or else our clients are going to want to be there. So lastly, I have a quote. It goes, be the change that you want to see in the world. People say it's by Gandhi, but it's actually by an author named Joseph Ranza. Just want to list that. It's a pretty nice quote. Cool. So then we get into the idea of barriers. So that plant growing out of the concrete, I think, is a very good example of overcoming a barrier. But a couple of potential barriers are costs, first and foremost. So Winnig and Wolfenstetter get into the idea that not only do new clients see a commitment of money when they go to the gym, they see it as, I got to drive to get to the gym. I got to spend time and energy there when I'm there. I have to spend time preparing meals if I want to be healthy rather than going to get food. And it just kind of creates this pothole of costs that they don't want to go into, right? It's everything, I'm trying to get a little bit healthier, but this is going to segue me into doing so many more things and taking so much more from me that it's sorry, my watch started talking to me. But yeah, so then you have the idea of poor access to facilities. So Anshel does a really good job of listing that in the textbook, that there are a lot of individuals who have this as a barrier, but I have it listed, so environmental barriers. So people hypothetically can't, or literally can't make it to a gym, a park, or somewhere to exercise, such as a pool, right? So of course you have that perceived version of can't, where they don't want to go out of their way. It's it's 15 minutes away and I just don't have 30 minutes to make the round trip. And I don't want to. I'd rather sit on my couch, eating potato chips and ice cream, watching X-Files. That's what I want to do. But, it's not that you can't. It's not that you can't. It's that you don't want to, right? So then also we do have people that literally cannot, right? If I live in the middle of nowhere and the nearest gym is 2 hours from me, God forbid 2 hours, it's how am I ever going to convince somebody to make a 4-hour round trip and spend time at the gym? Nobody has. Some people might, but most people aren't going to have time to do that. Cool. So then we get into my 4 factors. So I'm trying to keep this quick so I don't go over time. But so perceived lack of improvement was something that really plagued the older woman that I was studying. So for her, it was she set this time frame of how she wanted to lose weight and get back down to her size 4 pants or size 2, whichever she had said. Shouldn't get back down to her right size in X amount of time. She said 3 months or 4 months, something like that. And 1 month had gone by and she hadn't made any progress. She got on the scale, she did the measurements of her waist, and she's like, I'm not getting any closer to where I wanted to be. And the fact was that we looked at it, and it wasn't that she was not making progress, it's that she wasn't making progress that she wanted to see, right? Like those are two completely different things. To not make any progress at all because her weight had gone down, but she hadn't dropped as much weight as she wanted to. Her waist wasn't getting small enough. Next, we have the idea of unrealistic goals. This was something that the younger female set, and she wanted to get buff like her friends and get yoked up in 2 months. I looked at a picture of one of her friends, and I asked her, "Do you want to look like this?" She's like, "Yeah, in 2 months. In 2 months." I looked at her. I looked at the picture of her friend. I didn't know what drug she was going to take, honestly. But so I spoke to her, and I'm like, maybe step it back a little bit. Like, we have enough time. You can keep working at this. This is a long-term goal. Your friend has been lifting for the past 10 years. This isn't something you're going to achieve overnight, let alone in 2 months, right? So let's try to set more realistic goals. So that was something I really had to work at her with because, like, especially when you first get into weightlifting, you want to see huge progress. And when you don't see that huge progress, it starts to burden you. The cost, time mostly, affected the older female the most because her time was split between her small business she was running, teaching, and especially with everything going on, she's trying to get all the students involved and create lesson plans that got them like interactive. And working with her band, which she doesn't really do that much of now, but they kind of collaborate over the internet. And she kind of saw it as like, I like to exercise during the daytime. Like she likes to go out for walks, but all of her daytime, all of the sunlight was really taken from her by her job. So she couldn't really walk as much as she wanted to. So we had to create a workout plan that involved her doing things that were inside of the house because she didn't want to walk when it was dark. And that's a common concern. Most people don't want to be out exercising when it's nighttime. But yeah, and then the last one was lack of social support. So this one really hit there was only one male, but this really hit the male the most because he had grown so much into this culture of working and being involved with other things. And when he was younger, he was raising children and all that. And so he kind of got to this point where he was like, he spent all of his time and he needed convincing to spend some of that time on himself because it was easy for him. He stated it was really simple for him to give away his time to things that he thought were better, but it was hard for him to devote time to himself. So I had to be that social support for him to get him to spend time on himself. Second to last, we have my mission statement. So I'm going to try not to give a sermon on it because I'm watching my time and it's going pretty quickly. But so this verse really hits home to me because I have a problem leaning on my own understanding. I have a problem believing that I'm an island and I'll get through it and I'll be fine on my own. When really in the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verse 5, it says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding." So I emphasize this word, trust in the Lord, not in myself, trust in the Lord. Do not lean on my own understanding, right? So for me, this really resonates with me because when I was a kid, I think I was 12 or 13 at the time, my dad is a pastor, super involved with the church, right? He gave a short sermon on this verse alone. And he said, a lot of people accuse Christians of using God as a crutch to rely on God too much. And he looked at the crowd. He said, if you're going to accuse anyone for relying on God too much, point at me. Like, that's fine. Like, I have an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent God that wants to be there for me because he loves me more than anyone ever could be. He loves me more than anyone ever could. Why would I ever decide to go out on my own and not just put my faith completely in him? Okay, and then I selected this because, of course, you can't force religion on a client. But I think it's a really big, it could be a gateway for them because a lot of people turn to believing in things because they feel like they can't do it on their own. They want to have faith in something. They want to trust in something bigger than themselves. I think this is a great way to kind of hug them, to culture them into Christianity. The whole idea of being a Christian is that we do the absolute best that we can. We rely on God for everything else. And so the last thing is knowledge to apply moving forward. So for me, is absolutely setting quality goals is the biggest thing. So this was something that I always did growing up because that's what my father kind of fostered me into. But as we saw with the younger female, not everybody sets good quality goals that they can achieve. So the first reference I have is Goran. It's kind of a feel-good article that mentions why you should set quality goals and why, like, literally writing out your goals and looking at them every day is really good for you. And I was like, okay, yeah. As you read through it, you're like, yeah, set goals. This is for me. And then the second article by McKay really got into a new idea for me, which is the idea of using short-term goals to check your long-term goals' progress and to reevaluate them. So the example I like to use is, like, let's say I wanted to increase my bench press by 50 pounds, right? I'm like, I want to increase my bench press by 50 pounds in 2 years. It's okay, that's pretty realistic. So if I check it in 6 months, so my short-term goal is in 6 months, I want to have 1/4 of that. So like 15 pounds or so, 10, 15 pounds. So I go to bench press and I go and I get the 15 pounds more. Like, oh, you know what? I'm making good progress. I can keep going at this rate and eventually reach my goal. And that's a good thing. Like, I can reevaluate my goal. Like, this is completely doable. Whereas also on the other side, if I looked at it and I was like, you know what, I can't do this. Like, I got 5 pounds more. Maybe I should expand my time frame or lower that 50 pounds to 25 pounds, 30 pounds, something more realistic. So short-term, long-term goals working together to ultimately create the best possible environment for us and ultimately for my clients later in the future. So that being said, that about wraps it up. So I have my references. I'm not sure if you want to pause it and look at those, but that's all I've got for you. So Chris B signing out. See ya.